This past week saw a complete shift in what's being talked about nationally. For the past few months, the world has been talking about coronavirus and the lockdowns that result from it. But recently, a tragic event has sidelined talk about this worldwide pandemic. I am, of course, talking about the killing of George Floyd, a black man in Minneapolis. This has reignited discussions about police brutality with a lot more intensity than has been addressed in the past. I have seen most, if not all, of my close friends vocalizing their ardent support for the protesters and decrying the unjust killing of Floyd. Some have been providing links to charities and donations that go towards fighting causes against police brutality. Some have even marched alongside the protesters. The great thing for me is that none of this is partisan. You'll see liberals, conservatives, socialists, libertarians, all of which to me are very passionate in identifying what happened to Floyd as an injustice. I want to give my statement and position on not just the killing and the protests, but also some elements external to this, like the dialogue. I've had a lot of time to process and digest what I'm about to say, and I felt like this would be better in a video form for a couple of reasons. First, a video is a lot more concise than walls of text on Facebook and Twitter. Second, I believe that it will be easier to lay out and structure all of the points that I'm going to make. Lastly, I'm able to fully explain the entire context that I've thought about with sources much more easily. So I hope that you take in fully what I'm about to say and continue to the end of the video. I'll start off talking about what I find bad with this entire situation. I won't mince my words here. George Floyd was clearly murdered. What happened to him is gross and disgusting. It is horrific to watch that video of the police officer, Derek Chauvin, kneel on the neck of Floyd as he continually gasps for air. What is as bad, if not worse, is that the other officers just stood there while concerned bystanders commented on how he wasn't moving and asking for police to check his pulse. It troubles me that Chauvin had nearly 20 prior complaints leveled against him, and yet the oversight was so poor as to allow him to continue to serve. I am incredibly skeptical when it comes to government power, and I believe that police departments are subject to the same scrutiny. Take Minneapolis PD, for instance. As I mentioned beforehand, Chauvin had 18 or so prior complaints leveled against him. In 2013, Minneapolis cops had almost 450 complaints against them, with none resulting in disciplinary action. The lack of oversight and accountability is absolutely terrifying. Police officers are meant to be an example of justice and a personification of law and order. That perception is often trampled upon by the unbalanced power that the police possess and the actions that they impose, which can come in many forms. Police homicides are a very clear and topical example. There were about 16,000 murders in the US in 2018. Also, there were 1,100 police killings, which are a case where a person dies as a result of being shot, beaten, restrained, intentionally hit by a police vehicle, pepper sprayed, tasered, or otherwise harmed by police officers, whether on duty or off duty. I'll assume that some of these police homicides are included in the FBI crime statistics, so I'll make a range from 0 police homicides included to all police homicides included. This means that police commit anywhere from 6.54% to 6.997% of all homicides. This results in the police accounting for about 166 murders per 100,000. Take into consideration that the murder rate of the general population is about 5 per 100,000. We can argue whether these killings are just or unjust, but I believe that the work of the police should be to de-escalate tensions and to minimize bodily harm. There's no question whether police officers brutalize someone who is a suspected criminal before they're taken in, as non-lethality and lethality are both part of the police brutality issue. But there's more than just that. Domestic violence in police households is thought to be higher than the general populace. Some studies suggest rates as high as 40%, while others see a slightly smaller rate at 28%. Either way, it appears to be the case that domestic violence in police households is greater and could be underreported due to victims being particularly vulnerable for a variety of reasons. This high rate of police violence could be for a variety of reasons, including job-related stress and the failure of oversight. Greater levels of stress have been documented as manifesting in negative police behavior and coping outlets. Police union contracts could be shielding criminal officers from receiving just punishment. Outside of that, we can just look at police brutality as it pertains to the protests today. Tear gas and rubber bullets have been deployed. Journalists are arrested, assaulted, and silenced. There is even suspicion of police attempting to play up the issue and instigate violence through methods of vandalism and leaving behind throwable materials. All of this combines itself into a large mess of police performing criminal activities without being held accountable. Now I'll move on to the second topic of this video, and I'll preface it with something that should be obvious. I believe that protests are good and healthy. It's great to see people all across the country making their voices heard on this subject. I 100% respect the people who are going out and making a stand. A few of my friends even have gone out to the marches, and I support them. But there are select few people who think it is good to be opportunistic in this situation, opportunistic in a bad way. I am talking about the rioters and the looters. Several cities in the US have seen these riots and looting. Protesters have climbed and spray painted CNN headquarters in Atlanta. Chicago has seen particularly violent nights, marked with imposed curfew following chaotic scenes. Minneapolis is the heart of it all, and it features many examples of businesses and properties broken into, looted, and destroyed by fire. Even my home state of Ohio has seen destruction in Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Columbus. Curfews are being established, and police are using riot gear and tear gas to combat these riots. I think a lot of people are looking at the property destruction and thinking a human life is worth much more than replaceable windows and stock. The business owners are going to be able to afford reconstructing their businesses and buying back their stock, but a human life, that's something that can't be replaced. I agree with that. But expressing it through burning buildings and stealing from businesses which are in no way connected to what you're advocating for doesn't do anything to advance the cause. People are being negatively affected by this. While Target and AutoZone are national companies, they're still able to take out the cost of damages and missing stock on their employees, leaving them in a critical condition during this economic situation. Small business owners have it pretty rough as well. These stores that serve the community have been broken into, looted, and sometimes even burned to the ground. It's terrible to see people's livelihoods go up in smoke and ransacked like that. With all that being said, I do believe that there is a silver lining to this. Chauvin and the other officers were fired very quickly following Floyd's death, and Chauvin was charged with third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. Other charges are anticipated for the other 3 officers involved in this case. Even the FBI has made this a top priority to investigate, maybe insinuating federal charges to add on top. I have seen many videos along the lines of police marching alongside and vocalizing support for the protesters. There have been several cops on TikTok saying what happened to Floyd is awful and terrible, and what Chauvin has done has tarnished the badge. There are videos of cops abandoning their riot gear to march with the protesters. Police are taking knees to show their support, as well as embracing and interacting with the protesters. And police have been making demonstrations on their own. I personally find it odd that there are some people saying that those cops are being disingenuous in their actions supporting the protesters. I, for one, am usually trusting of people who make statements and actions like this, and I really don't have enough to say that the cops making those statements and actions are being disingenuous. There's a chance that it can happen, but I don't think it's true in this instance. Something else really great that I've seen is the willpower of the protesters to make sure that what they're doing best represents what they're trying to promote. This comes in many forms. There have been incidents of protesters stopping potential and acting rioters and looters by handing them over to police and getting in their way. Armed protesters have even shown up to stop any more potential rioters and looters. Another really great thing that I've seen is volunteers and protesters coming back to these communities wrecked with destruction to help clean up and rebuild. This is a tremendously selfless act, and I commend everyone taking a part in this. Strengthening communities is something that I heavily support. Lots of communities are wrought with poverty, crime, and much more. And I feel like more efforts need to be taken from a community standpoint in order to make some real change. Seeing this is a great step towards that. The last great thing that I've seen is the outpouring and generous nature of people donating to charity and to causes combating police brutality. On GoFundMe, there is an official George Floyd Memorial Fund, which has a stated goal of raising $1.5 million. At the time of this video being recorded, it has overshot its goal by a ridiculous margin, raising $11.4 million. The money will go towards expenses for Floyd's funeral, court proceedings, and Floyd's estate for his kids' care and education. I highly recommend you donate to this. Link will be in the description of the video. Loads of small businesses have been affected by the riots and looting. One example is Scores Sports Bar in Minneapolis. The business was anticipating reopening following the new COVID guidelines, but was unfortunately looted, vandalized, and destroyed. The owner of the bar is an active and proud member of the community, working as a coach and a firefighter. They've raised $1 million so far, and again, I highly recommend that you donate to their GoFundMe as well. A link to that will also be in the description. There are other campaigns to keep in mind of as well. Campaign Zero is a policy reform campaign dedicated to ending police violence through 10 prescribed policy proposals. A lot of these are proposals I support, like mandatory body cameras, better training, creating and maintaining community oversight, ending for-profit policing, reworking police union contracts. Again, I highly recommend you donate to this cause. Link in the description. There are a couple of other things that I wanted to bring attention to in this video. I've seen a lot of people attempting to justify the actions of the rioters by referencing actions and events such as the Boston Tea Party. This comparison is flawed for a couple of reasons. First, the target of the Boston Tea Party was a monopolistic business propped up by the British monarchy called the British East India Company. A similar target in today's standards would be police precincts and public buildings, rather than private businesses. The British East India Company was targeted because it was given monopolistic power via the Tea Act of 1773, an act meant to undercut the price of illegal tea. During the night of the Boston Tea Party, 340 chests of British East India Company tea were smashed and dumped into the harbor, valued today at $1.7 million. Damage wasn't done to any of the ships or the crew, except for one broken padlock. As one might expect, Martin Luther King Jr. has been brought up a lot during these times. His son, MLK III, posted a quote from his father's The Other America speech. People have criticized him, saying that his father would never resort to using violence as a means to promote his message. And as you might expect, those comments have come under fire from others. I personally think that it's very important to look back on what Martin Luther King Jr. said in full context, and I'll provide a link to his full speech in the description. This speech separates America into two sections, one where there's prosperity and happiness, and another where there's rampant poverty and inequality. He goes on to talk about one group that is seen the worst of the worst, black people. Segregation, racism, poverty, and misery are all met with struggle and protest, and this struggle and protest is often very slow and arduous. Even in victories like the civil rights bills, there's still inequalities and injustices that need to be addressed and tackled. The key part of this speech comes when he addresses riots. He says that the conditions, existence of widespread poverty, slums, have brought about a great deal of despair and a great deal of depression. Many in moments of anger, many in moments of deep bitterness, engage in riots. Let me say, as I've always said, and I will always continue to say, that riots are socially destructive and self-defeating. I'm still convinced that nonviolence is the most potent weapon available to oppressed people in their struggle for freedom and justice. I feel that violence will only create more social problems than they will solve. But, at the same time, it is as necessary for me to be as vigorous in condemning the conditions for which cause persons to feel that they must engage in riotous activities as it is for me to condemn riots. I think America must see that riots do not develop out of thin air. Certain conditions continue to exist in our society which must be condemned as vigorously as we condemn riots. But in the final analysis, A riot is the language of the unheard. All of what he says there is correct. You can be incredibly vocal in calling out the riots, as well as the situations that lead up to the riots. You don't have to pick and choose which one you're going to defend and which ones you don't. I feel that I've been consistent in calling out bad actors wherever they come from, whether it be the brutality of certain police officers or the malicious and opportunistic actions of rioters and looters. To close on this section, it would be foolish of me not to bring up and reference what the family of George Floyd is saying right now. George Floyd's son attended a protest in Texas on Sunday and said that he was glad to see all the displays of love and compassion towards his father. Floyd's brother Terrence says that his family has a long road ahead and that just because they're protesting peacefully doesn't mean that they don't want all of the 4 officers who killed and let his brother die locked up. He is remembered by many friends and family as a beautiful spirit, a community organizer, a great friend, like a brother, and more. I'll end this video summarizing what I said. George Floyd was very clearly killed. I hope to see that all the officers involved in his death get the justice that they deserve. And my heart goes out to all victims of police brutality. The people protesting this injustice are in the right mindset, and it's great to see a lot of them helping out further by volunteering to rebuild businesses and calling out bad actors like the rioters and the looters. I feel like in a lot of situations like these, this is an opportunity for America to come together. It's very clear to me that the problem has been diagnosed, but the prescription isn't entirely clear. I hope that different proposed solutions doesn't lead to hostilities and accusations of not actually caring about the cause. That would be very far from the truth. Most people care about the lives lost through injustice, and they want to see things improve. I'm always open to talking about these issues in any setting and at any time. If you have any comments or criticisms or looking for clarifications on anything that I've said in this video, please feel free to reach out to me, let me know about them, talk to me. I'm down to talk. Please donate to any of the links that I've put in the description, as I think it'll go a long way. If you have any other charities that you think should be supported as well, I'd be very happy to look into them and donate. With that being said, thank you very much for watching.